Abraham ran towards it himself, and considering his condition, you would think that he would have been able to attend to their needs much quicker if he would have sent someone else. He did send, as you know, mentioned the young man, which they say was Yishmael. He had a young son, Yishmael. He had other members of his household. Could have gotten the food on the table more quickly. Why did he have to run himself? And that's obviously because it was more than just the food. Abraham, by personally running to greet the guests, showed them a greater level of respect and showed greater value for them by personally running to greet them, even though perhaps it took a little longer. And that's a concept that we can learn. The importance of not just attending to your guests' physical needs, but attending to their spiritual needs. And Abraham says, Rashi says that please, now that you've come to my door, please stay here. Don't travel on before you stop in for a bite to eat. This would be a great honor to me. And, what kind of honor does it bring to Abraham? He's considered, even by his pagan neighbors, to be a prince of God. How do three wandering Arabs, who, as far as he knows, are idol worshippers, and people of no significance, as far as he knows, how does inviting them in for a meal bring honor to Abraham? And what is it going to add to his status? And yet, he saw it that way. He obviously wasn't lying. He felt that every human being is created in the image of Hashem. The opportunity to show hospitality to a human being, no matter what kind of human being it is a great honor and a great privilege. So we can learn something from that. Right? It follows that we have to understand that the laws of Mishpatim work in the same way. Now that we see the stories of the Torah contain so much nuance, so much detail, and they're really laws with a tremendous amount of depth and many dimensions. So when we look at the laws of Mishpatim, it's not just about a specific situation that's described in the Torah, but each law opens into many principles, and again, including the actual laws that I discussed, plus applications and additional nuances. For example, the Alter Chabad just said that the Ten Commandments include not murdering, which what society doesn't have a law against murdering? But it says the Torah speaks about not murdering. It means a lot more than just not to murder. We know that the Torah says embarrassing someone is like blood drains from their face. So when the Torah says don't murder, it doesn't mean, of course, it means not to kill people, but it also means not to do anything that can be considered killing in any sense, and that includes embarrassing someone or anything that falls in the spectrum of murder, and that applies to the laws of damages. Any of the laws of Mishpatim, we have to understand there's a continuum. There's the actual law. Just 1 minute, please. We have to step away from the phone for a moment. I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back. Sorry about that interruption.
Okay.
Okay, so um, uh, the laws of Mishpatim are, again, there are specific laws that pertain to specific situations, but they also teach us principles. And the real point is that in the Torah, ethics and law are not really separate things, but they're part of the seamless package that Hashem has given us. They're all aspects of the total picture in which a Jew becomes more godlike and closer to Hashem. And by observing all these laws together, and some that we understand, some that we don't, some that are very technical and specific, some that are general, but it's an entire picture. And when the Jews said the Nasa Benishma, they were told that Hashem had offered the Torah to various different nations, and each of them asked about the content of the Torah, and in each case Hashem told them something that they felt wouldn't fit with their lifestyle and with their culture. And when it came to the Jews, Hashem opened them the Torah, they said, Nasa Benishma. Rabbi explained, they said, we'll do it, and then we'll be happy to hear whatever it is that we have to do. And they gave it like a commitment. They didn't say what's in it, let's see if we can. They said, we'll do it. And whatever it is, you can tell us later what's in it. We'll accept it without knowing. And that commitment is, was a great secret. Hashem said, who told my children this secret? And to give that appropriate response, that no one else was able to give, that ability to have absolute trust in Hashem. And it tells us that the Torah is not about kind of a shopping list of different principles. Obviously, we know, and it can never be reminded too many times of the fact that the Torah is not an all or nothing. And it's very important, especially for us, to feel that just because we're not perfect and we haven't done everything right, but the Sahara will try to tell us that if you can't do it completely, 100%, then we'll give up. And that's very wrong. We have to understand that every mitzvah, every good thing that we do is a positive. And the fact that a person may not do everything right, or even, within a particular journey, we may get it wrong. There's that you say Sheva Yipol Tzaddik will come, a Tzaddik falls 7 times and gets up. So I heard this from one of my Rebbeim. Tzaddik falls 7 times and gets up. So it means that he's fighting the Yetzer Hara, and 7 times he fails and gets up. He defeats the Yetzer Hara. So you would think that someone who the Yetzer Hara loses 7 times, and he gets up and defeats the Yetzer Hara once, doesn't sound like a tzaddik. If a person considered a tzaddik for doing mostly good things, considered a rasha for doing mostly bad things, for someone who loses 7 times and wins once doesn't sound like a tzaddik. The truth is that there's no reason that a person like that can't get tzaddik. If it's a difficult challenge, a person fails 7 times, those 7 failures may be understandable. Wrong, but it's certainly extenuating circumstances, and the one time that he succeeds may outweigh in value over the 7 failures. So we can't look at imperfection, even serious imperfection, as a reason to throw in the towel. But nevertheless, we still have to recognize the Torah as a whole. It's not a long list of different principles. Certainly, the idea that what Chazal makes this point very strongly, that a person, in the other side of the Shari Chum, if a person says, there's one mitzvah that I won't accept, and it's like a servant that tells the master, I'll do anything you command me except for one thing. That's not a servant, it's not a master. Because that means the servant saying, I'm in charge. I'll do everything you can except for one thing. It's the same thing as saying, I won't do anything you say. I'll do what I want. I'll only do, if I'm ready to say one thing that you ask me that I won't do, basically means I don't feel bound to obey a commandment. So we have to realize that we don't have to be perfect, but we have to have a complete commitment to recognize that what Hashem tells us to do is all part of one whole. And Hashem's commitment has to be totally to obey the word of Hashem. And it's not as though there's different parts of the Torah. People, rabbis make the point that the Torah is composed of mitzvot that govern how we deal with other people. A lot of the mitzvot in this parsha, monetary law, financial dealings, and there are mitzvot that govern the relationship between us and God. When we think of it as the religious stuff, prayer and how we observe the holidays and things like that. But those are not separate parts of the Torah. It's impossible to be successful in one area without the other. One example of a mitzvah that contains elements of both, and we think of sometimes the other way that we classify the mitzvahs of the Torah, chukim and mishpatim. And mishpatim means in the sixth parsha, it means laws. We call the logical and just laws of justice. Mishpat, in modern Hebrew as well, means justice. Shofet is a judge. So Mishpatim are laws of justice, things that govern our behavior based on principles of fairness and proper relationships between people, principles of integrity. Chukim are sort of decrees, things that have been the word chok, it's like the verb in Hebrew, lachok means to engrave, to carve, something set in stone, something carved out or set out in stone, without necessarily any reason that we can discern. So the contrast, and the Torah uses these words fairly frequently, chukim and mishpatim. Chukim are decrees, things that are handed down to us and engraved in the bedrock of the world without any reason necessarily that we can discern. The Mishpatim are principles of fairness and justice that are pretty accessible to us as far as their meaning. So another set of Hebrew terms that we use are what we call mitzvot sichlios, but for the word seichel, which means common sense. But Mishpatim are mitzvahs that seem to reflect common sense, the kind of laws that all societies have, because they're simply logical. And the chukim are the laws that don't have any rhyme or reason necessarily that we can discern. Laws like not wearing shatnez, not wearing clothing that contains wool or linen, not mixing milk and meat, law of the red heifer, lulav and esrog. There are many mitzvahs that if they're religious, they seem they have some spiritual meaning to them, but we can't necessarily discern what it is. The truth is, though, that if you look at the Torah, and I believe, as time goes on, I see this, that it isn't necessarily a black and white distinction, that every law is either a chok or a mishpat. The truth is that laws contain elements of both. So, for example, even the many mitzvahs that don't have obvious reason to them, like the kosher laws, like not mixing wool and linen, but it's very common for commentators to step forward and offer explanations or partial explanations, give some level of interpretation, suggested reasonings. And even in mitzvahs like we find in this parsha, the Mishpatim, which have logical and just underpinnings, there always seem to be nuances that defy logic. So, for example, Torah tells us in this week's parsha that if somebody steals a sheep or a cow and slaughters it or sells it, they have to pay 5 cows to reimburse the owner for the 1 cow which was stolen, or 4 sheep if it was a sheep that was stolen. And that seems to have no obvious explanation for it. Well, the Torah makes it clear that when a person steals, they have to give back what they've stolen. And in some cases, they have to pay double if they swore falsely, denied it in some way. But why in this case where the cow is stolen or slaughtered, do you suddenly have to pay multiple times over? And why is it only a sheep or a cow, not any other animal? So again, this is a law that doesn't seem to have any obvious rhyme or reason to it. And I think we would classify it as a chok, a law in the Mishpat, with the general sense of justice and fairness of someone who steals something can pay, but the fact that we suddenly impose this extreme penalty on the person would seem to be a mysterious nuance that doesn't necessarily have any logical reason. And yet, within that, and I don't think it negates the idea that this is mysterious and hard to understand, there is a reason. Rashi gives us a reason. Well, it's 2 statements from the Chazal. One of them is that this is the power of war. Well, what Rashi comes to tell us, interestingly, is not an explanation for why you have to pay such an extreme penalty, but why the difference between the cow and the sheep? Why 5 for the cow and 4 for the sheep? So Rashi says, first of all, second of all, actually, the second reason he gives is that a cow does work on the farm, and therefore someone who stole the cow or the bull, depriving the farmer not just of the animal, the meat or the milk that the animal can provide, but also of the labor that the animal helps with, as opposed to the sheep, where it's only the sheep itself. The sheep doesn't actually do any work. So it's a lesson about the power and the value of work. The other explanation that Rashi cites is that a person who steals a sheep carries it on his shoulder, typically. That's a little bit embarrassing, and therefore the Torah views the person as having received some of his penalty already in that form, and therefore we reduce, instead of making him pay 5 sheep, we make him pay only 4. Whereas the cow, presumably, no one's carrying a cow on their shoulder, so he leads it through the street and doesn't have to suffer that embarrassment, therefore pays 5-fold. And that's a point that we should focus on, because the person who steals the sheep obviously is choosing to steal a sheep, and he's probably not doing it in a place where people will notice and certainly recognize that he's the one stealing the sheep, because then he won't get away with it. So he obviously did it in secret. Now, I don't know if that means he feels embarrassed because he's carrying a sheep even though nobody sees it, or maybe he steals it in a place where he won't be recognized. But the point is that he's probably more concerned at that time. We're not talking about a sophisticated white-collar crime. This guy is stealing a sheep. He's probably not from the most refined members of society to begin with, and he's probably thinking more about lamb chops he's going to have for dinner than about the loss of dignity. He may not care. He may not be cognizant of it. And most of all, nobody asked him to steal the sheep. And yet the Torah says, in deference to the indignity that he suffered, we're going to reduce the penalty. See, that the Torah cares more about the dignity and the sense of honor that a person is entitled to than the person himself. The person may not care, may not even be aware of compromising his dignity, and yet the Torah says, not only are we aware of it, we're going to lighten the burden of penalty on you, because as a human being created in the image of Hashem, for you to suffer the disgrace of carrying a sheep on your shoulders is something that we have to be sympathetic to. We have to be compassionate towards the suffering that you've experienced as a result of this crime that you committed. And that's certainly a lesson in what it means to respect a human being, even a person who doesn't seem deserving of respect, and even a person who isn't respecting himself. But yet the Torah says to be sensitive and to recognize that sense of dignity is there, and that the person is aware of it on some level, even if he doesn't feel like he's hurting himself, but he is hurting himself. And we have to be sensitive to that, sympathetic to the self-inflicted hurt the person is experiencing. It also shows us that here's a good example of a law which is basically a mishpat. It's a law of justice. Don't steal a sheep. And then there's a nuance that in certain cases you have to pay 4 times as much for no reason that we can discern. And yet, even within that, there's an aspect of mishpat, a nuance that we can learn about when we think about the difference between the sheep and the cow, and the contrast between 4 times and 5 times. So it's like a mishpat within a chok, within a mishpat. Many of the laws of the Torah work the same way. And even if we can't fully grasp all the nuances, we can understand the principles. And from the principles, we can extend it to other principles. And, there's a story about Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. He was, one of the greatest, most respected scholars of his time. And he promoted the Musar movement, which was his creation, a revolution of focusing on the study of Musar ethics in the traditional yeshiva context, making that a part of the daily regimen for all people. I've heard different versions of the story. I think in one version, this was part of his efforts to sell his wares. He would go place to place and he would deliver lectures, advanced lectures in Talmud, and they would kind of establish his credentials. And because of that, he was able to, have a platform to promote his ideas, the ethical revolution. Anyways, the story goes that he was planning to deliver a lecture in a certain town, and he put up, as typically be the case, a list of citations for people to study the source material in advance. And some pranksters decided to take down the list and put up instead a list of random citations, completely different. So when he came the next day to deliver the lecture, he looked at the list and he realized that the list of citations was completely different from what he had originally written. And he turned pale and he hesitated. Then he got up and delivered a flawless lecture with the random set of unconnected citations that had been put up. So again, according to one version of the story, this was really a attempt by those people who were not, the reaction to the Musar movement, people who were anti-Musar, were trying to discredit him. I think I've heard a version where it was simply a prank, but either way, the point was that he was able to put together a lecture on the spot with completely unrelated citations. And one of his students said the reason he turned pale and hesitated wasn't because he had any doubt about his ability to deliver a lecture anyways, but he was concerned because of a moral dilemma. Perhaps doing such a thing would be even more impressive than delivering the prepared lecture that he had in mind previously, and perhaps that would be showing off. But then he decided, and again, according to the version of the story, that it was to promote the Muslim movement. He felt that because of his need to promote his agenda, that he had to do it anyways. But what was the explanation for how a person can do something like that, off the cuff and deliver a lecture that ties together such unrelated pieces of information? And the answer is, let me explain. We have a principle in Talmud. The earth is one block, right? If you buy a field in one country, you can simultaneously purchase several fields in several different places because they're all connected, through the earth, under the ground. All land is connected. So the Torah is the same way. Each piece is connected to every other piece. Once you get down to it, the deeper you have an understanding of the underlying principles, you see how the Torah is a seamless whole. Every part is connected to every other part, and it isn't hard to get from one place. No matter where you're starting from, you can get to any other place by following the right channels. And the deeper your knowledge is, and the more thorough, the more you can go deep and travel through the subterranean tunnels from any point A to any point B. So hopefully, we'll be able to, each one of us in our own way, we have access to these principles of the Torah. We're not as profound, but all of us, the more we learn, the more we see the connections, and the more we see the bridges that take us from one area to the other, the common threads that run through the Torah, and hopefully we'll be able to incorporate them into our way of thinking, into our way of feeling, and that will guide us to fulfill Hashem's will in every way and to be the complete type of perfected human being that Hashem designed us to be. On that note, I want to thank everyone for joining in today and wish you a very good week. All goes well. Hopefully, we'll speak again next week. Till then, take care and have a wonderful week.
Thank you, Rabbi.